Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and today I want to talk to you about how I manage my sugar cravings in my binge eating recovery. Sometimes in the way intuitive eating is spoken about is it can sound like give yourself full permission to eat all foods, including all your sweet foods, because when you do that and you take the morality out of it, your desire for those foods will diminish. Now for me, unconditional permission to eat these foods was a crucial part of my recovery. What it did was it reduced the intensity of my binges. It also got rid of that Last Supper eating mentality where I was eating large amounts of food because I was telling myself that tomorrow I had to be good. But what it did leave me with was still this sense of overeating on sugar and still feeling a bit compulsive around sugar, even if I wasn't having the big binges that I was having before. So then I had to do a lot of work on my relationship with sugar to get myself into a place where I truly felt free. Now this week I have experienced some pretty intense sugar cravings, which is the inspiration for this video. And for the first time in probably months and months and months, I found myself feeling quite stressed about food and about what I'd eaten, because I did end up eating more sugar over these days than I normally would have chosen to. And it felt a little compulsive, and that was a bit scary. But I was there and I met myself, because the first commitment that I have made to myself is that I will not judge myself for what I eat. And that's not to say that I won't have food regret and think, oh, I wish I'd made a different decision. But I don't make it mean something about me, that these sugar cravings were so intense and that I ended up eating more sugar that in hindsight, I would have wanted to. So I'm all for asking questions. So there are certain questions that I will ask myself when I'm experiencing a strong desire for sugar. And I'm going to share these questions with you. I will pop them in the description below so that you can come back to them as well, and maybe you'll find them useful too. So the first one might be obvious. Have I eaten enough today? I am more likely to crave sugar if my meal times have been all over the place, or I haven't eaten as much during the day. If you think about it, if you get to the end of the day, even if you have a big meal, if you haven't eaten enough during the day, your brain knows. And if your brain wants more food after a meal, it makes sense to want sweet, higher calorie foods because it wants to get the energy in. Eating 2 dinners is not likely to feel very comfortable. So sometimes it's as simple as I haven't eaten enough during the day, even if it's not hunger that I'm feeling because I've got a full stomach. And I also want to add that when I ask these questions, it's not that, oh, if you answer yes to this question, then go ahead and eat the sugar. And if you answer no, then don't eat the sugar. Having the food is always an option. That is the unconditional permission to eat part. But what I'm looking to do is to try to understand my reasons and look after myself in the best way I can. And looking after myself doesn't mean always saying no to sugar, and it also doesn't mean always saying yes. It's trying to open up a sense of choice. The next question, and this is a tougher one for me, but I do ask it, and that is, am I tired? Because for me, sugar can be such something I can reach for to give me like a boost in energy. But conversely, it's often followed by a crash. So sometimes when resting isn't an option, I might end up reaching for sugar. But I will try to rest if I can. Sleep is very important to me. I know your life might not be set up in a way that you can sleep well, but I do. I have a really self-nurturing wind-down routine at the end of the day, and I tend to sleep well. But I do feel tired, particularly in the afternoons. And it's harder in the winter because actually what I need at that time is to have a little nap. If I have a 15-minute nap, I feel refreshed. But sometimes I resist it because I don't want to nap. I'm recording this in January. The days are short in the UK. I don't want to be asleep for any of the daylight hours because we haven't got enough of them. So this is probably the one that's the most work in progress for me, is learning to honor my tiredness and being willing to rest, because sometimes the idea of rest makes me feel like I'm missing out on something if I'm unconscious. But I've also learned the benefits of just a 5-10 minute power nap, or lying down and doing like a guided meditation, a body scan kind of thing. All of these things I've found to be incredibly refreshing. I don't think I, and maybe a lot of society, has a great relationship with rest. We think we're supposed to be go, go, go. And I appreciate that not everyone's day is set up in a way that you can just go and take a nap. But I wonder how often you're pushing yourself to do things that could be put off for you to go and rest, and making rest a priority, having that time to recharge. When I use the word rest, I mean restoration. So rest can be lying and having a nap. Rest can also be getting outside and having a walk if that recharges you. Another question I ask myself, and I do this one a lot, is how do I honor this craving and mitigate the blood roller coaster effect? So if we eat sweet foods, particularly on an empty stomach, we get a sugar spike and then we get a crash. Falling blood sugar prompts the stomach to produce more ghrelin, which makes you feel hungrier. So this is not a hard and fast rule. This is a real gentle negotiation with myself. So it could be something like, okay, I've been craving something sweet, but I'm going to have my lunch first, and then I'm going to have the food after my lunch. Or it might be, I'm going to add in some food with fiber. So I might have a piece of fruit, and then I'll have my sweet food, just to try and mitigate these spikes and these drops. But figuring out how to do this in a way that isn't restrictive, that isn't about saying, no, you can't have the sugar. It's more like, how do I honor the craving and look after my biology, my blood glucose levels? Another one with this is just moving for 10 minutes after you've eaten something sweet. Because what that does is it gets the body to drive the sugar into the muscles where it can be utilized for energy, so you're less likely to have that crash as well. But be careful if you're struggling with an eating disorder, because this can turn into, oh, I've eaten this thing and I have to compensate by exercising. We're not talking hard cardio here. And I find that on days when I move less anyway, that's when I'm likely to crave sugar more. So there is something about moving my body, even pottering, even standing up and cooking. I've really, over the last few months, got to enjoy cooking more than I ever have. I've always said I don't really like cooking, but I actually enjoy it. It gets me to move around a little bit, which is actually, I'm feeling the benefits of that anyway. Another question that I will ask myself is, what does this physically feel like? This desire for sugar, where is it in my body? How does it feel? And can I move toward that discomfort? Because what I find by doing that is when I get in touch with those physical sensations, what I often notice is there's like a bit of a contraction, there's a tensing up in this desire. On Wednesday, when I was really experiencing this strong desire for sugar at about 3 p.m, I remember noticing that like even my breathing was shallow because I was tensing up against this. I had a few days of these cravings and I was starting to feel stressed out by these cravings. But when I notice what's going on in my body, because it's the mind that's spinning stories about what you need and why, but when I notice what's going on in my body and I notice that contraction, I can make the choice to deliberately hold my body differently. I want to do this, but I get my body to do that. When I set an intention not to fight with the physical sensation to see if I can welcome it, sometimes it starts to move and morph into something different that feels a little bit more manageable. What does a craving actually feel like for you? If you didn't have the story in your mind that this feeling means you need to go and get the sugar, could you bear the feeling? Is it that unbearable at the physical level? I find for me it's not comfortable, but it's not like really painful. It's the mind that escalates the feeling, particularly, and this is why not fighting with sugar cravings is so important. On Wednesday, I almost felt like I was about to go into this white knuckling because I was feeling stressed out that it'd been several days in a row of this really strong urge to keep eating sugar. So what I did on Wednesday, which leads me into the next question, is sometimes, and again, like use this one cautiously, this is not one to be used all the time because you might set up a kind of it could slip into the restrictive mindset a bit if it's misused. Because I was feeling a bit stressed and I recognized I was now fighting with the craving, it almost didn't feel safe to eat the sweet food because it had got as high as it had, because I'd been fighting with it. So this question is, can I use some form of external support to make me feel safer to honor this craving? So what I did, because I had a client at a particular time, I thought I'm going to go to Ollie and Steen and get a banana muffin, and I'm going to eat it just before I go to see my client, because then I'm going to eat the muffin and I have 2 hours of clients. And so I ate the muffin mindfully, and then because I was going into client work, my focus was then on that. Had I had the muffin and then finished the muffin and still had a craving for sugar, and then had to negotiate with myself with that craving continuing, that was the thing that I didn't feel like in that moment, I didn't feel grounded enough to trust how well I could handle that situation. But at the same time, I wanted to honour the sugar craving. So this is the gentle negotiation part that I sometimes talk about. How do I gently negotiate with myself to honour the craving? But if I'm not feeling quite safe with the craving, how do I look after myself? So for some people, this might be having a sweet food when you're with other people, because you know it's not going to turn into a binge. And what I found during these days of these sugar cravings was that other foods were feeling quite unsatisfying. So I was noticing this and I was saying, can I accept that at the moment my regular meals are not feeling very satisfying because I've got this low hum of cravings around? And when I accepted that, I didn't catastrophize it. In the past, eating food and not feeling satisfied, massive trigger to binge. I was asking myself, do I need to accept that food is going to feel unsatisfying? On Wednesday morning, I got up and my breakfast just seemed so unappealing. I just didn't want it. So I asked myself the question, what would actually be looking after myself right now? Because I had 4 hours of clients, so it was either have breakfast or it was skipping breakfast and not eating till lunchtime. That didn't seem very wise to me. So I ate my breakfast a little bit miserably because it just didn't taste good, even though it's a breakfast that I normally love. But because I was so consciously aware of that, I didn't catastrophize, and I could accept that discomfort, just not feeling very satisfied. You might be watching this and thinking, gosh, this sounds like a lot of work. I could never imagine myself being able to ask myself all these questions. I want to come back to that commitment I have made to myself not to judge what I eat. So it doesn't matter whether I eat the sugar or not. What matters is that I show up for myself in the way I speak to myself, in the way I try to look after myself. And even when I make decisions that in hindsight, I have a bit of food regret, because I will have food regret sometimes in hindsight, it's not guilt, it's not shame. I have made a commitment to just do everything I can to understand what this dynamic is with me and food. And I would invite you to make that commitment to yourself, because I think it's a game changer. It was for me anyway. And before I end, I just want to let you know that if you want to work with me, I currently have a couple of spaces available in my weekly lunchtime binge eating therapy groups. I'll put the link below. And also you could join the monthly support meetings, the Connect and Recover groups if you want to, and I'll pop the details for that below as well. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.